award-winning Tennessee Wildcast is on the air with the latest on hunting, fishing, boating, wildlife watching, and all things outdoors. Make welcome your host, drummer and outdoor expert novice, Jason Harmon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this edition of Tennessee Wildcast. We're glad you're tuning in. Thanks for watching and for listening. We got another great show for you today lined up. We're going to talk about the Snot Otter, which we'll leave you hanging there on that one. I'll let y'all think about that in for a minute. Mr. Don King helping me co-host.
You bet, Jason. Thanks for the invite, and I know I'm going to jump up and thank one of our radio stations. Actually, it's our flagship. It was the first station that started carrying Wildcast several years ago in Cowan, Tennessee, WZYX. We're on Saturdays at 6 in the morning. 1440 AM, 94.5 FM, and 95.3 FM, WZYX in Cowan.
Awesome.
We appreciate them very much, as well as our other radio stations.
Yes, we thank them all. Great. It's great to be the first, though. It was got the ball rolling.
Yep,
so
that's right.
We appreciate them very much for being a Tennessee Wildcast radio partner. And that's awesome. So I mentioned Snot Otter as the show started there, and if you know what that is, it's the Hellbender. It's a pretty cool creature, and we're going to get into that today. We brought back Josh Campbell and Mallory Tate to help us break this down and learn more about them.
That's great.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be back on such short notice.
Quick turnaround, wasn't it?
It was.
We had so much fun talking about bats last time they were here that we had to just sneak in another show today.
Yeah, that's good.
So, restoring snot otters in Tennessee. You gave this presentation at the commission meeting a couple weeks ago, and I thought, well, this would be a great topic for a show, and we could dive right into this. But I guess from the top, tell us what a Hellbender is and kind of get us started on what we're going to talk about today.
So, Hellbender is an amphibian, and it's a salamander, but it's an aquatic salamander. So it's actually one that people don't see a lot here in the state, and they're not very familiar with. So when they encounter it, it can kind of instill some fear.
Right, yeah.
And it's got some odd names over the years. Snot Otter's one because of the amount of slime on its skin.
Okay.
But, the slime's not for us or it's not to ward us off. It's to protect the animal. And it's been called the devil dog. And some places, people will actually nail them to trees if they catch them because it kind of breaks a curse in their mind. So,
wow.
I hadn't heard that one.
Yeah,
first.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
So there's been a few places where they do get nailed to trees from time to time. So, and every once in a while we have a fisherman that calls in that actually has caught one on hook and line or catch one on a trout line in a large body of water.
What the heck is this?
Yeah. So they're really cool animals. And one the agency's been working with again for 10 or 12 years here in the state, trying to figure out as much as we can about it. So. Because
awesome.
It's a good keystone or species that indicates what may or may not be going on in some of our aquatic environments, because it does rely on the aquatic environment, so different things could have impacts to it. And so if there's a loss of Hellbenders, that indicates that maybe something's going on in that system. So,
right.
And so we've been looking at that.
It's so cool you guys deal with critters that we don't see all that often,
Yes.
that are there, and we appreciate when we know about them. But a lot of people just don't ever encounter them. And but you guys spend your careers taking care of them, the ones that are lesser known and seldom seen. So that's
it is,
cool.
yeah. And one of the things we mentioned in the last one, species of greatest conservation need, and our division kind of oversees actions or conservation measures that kind of help get the species of greatest conservation need off the list.
Yeah.
But there's almost, in counting plants, there's almost 1,500 species of greatest conservation need in the state. And so there's a lot of things in the state, as biodiverse as Tennessee is, there's a lot of things we're concerned about. So, and the Hellbender is one of those. So, one of many.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in, or get something else.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, and I'm sure we'll come across it as Josh dives into what we're going to be talking about today, but one of the take-homes I got from your presentation when I was at the meeting was the loss of habitat through people going to a stream and deciding they want to take rocks and stack them and see how high they can stack them just for fun.
It's one of those things that has picked up in popularity. You see it a lot on Facebook and social media where they're taking these great pictures of and doing amazing things architecturally, stacking these rocks and getting them to bend and stay standing. But when you pull those rocks out of that stream or creek, you're actually removing habitat for animals.
Right.
Not just hellbenders. There's a lot of aquatic species that utilize those rocks and things for cover and in the stream. So, and it's a big campaign for a lot of agencies, not just TWRA, but the Don't Stack the Rocks campaign.
Sure.
To keep from pulling those rocks out of the stream.
An agency that also deals with this rock stacking issue worded it really well by saying that you picking up this one rock that this hellbender has worked so hard to nest under is like a tornado picking up the perfect house that you've put together for 10 years, throwing it over there for an Instagram post. So.
Right.
Wow.
Short-lived.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I like that. Well, we're going to jump into a presentation. If you're listening to the show today, go back and watch this one because there'll be some pictures and some interaction here on the screen that you can check out. But go ahead, Josh. Let's jump in. And like you said, we gave this presentation at the commission meeting. I thought it was cool to kind of hit on.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to start off with are some of the common myths associated with hellbenders, because like I mentioned, people when they see it or encounter it, it kind of steals a little bit of fear, and there's been some urban legends that have been created around the species over the years. And the species is not poisonous; it's not venomous. They do have a nasty bite. They've got a lot of they can be aggressive, and they've got a lot of small teeth because of their preferred prey. And so they got to have those teeth to hold them. So they bite. The bite's painful, but there's no poison or venom associated with the bite. So and I've seen some researchers come out of the water with a lot of blood pulling down their hands and things like that. So
one of the things I've noticed too is you look at the animal just floating along, kind of swimming comfortably, and you think, wow, that's very docile, moves very slow and slow motion, and then you see it feed.
Yes.
I actually consider them our one amphibian that could be considered charismatic megafauna because they're so cool to watch.
Yeah.
They're pretty big, and they are pretty aggressive. So they'll fight, they'll tear apart some snakes, they'll eat snakes.
Really?
I think they're worthy of a Disney movie.
When they move, they are lightning fast. I mean,
Yes.
Just looking at them at the zoo, we've been over there looking at some of the species, the samples they've got there that they're raising there.
Yeah, there's been many hellbenders missed because if you don't get under that rock quick enough, they're gone.
Yeah.
So, but one of the other myths is the fact that they slime lines. They see that fishing line go in the water and just kind of make fishing not fun for you. They'll slime your lines, which apparently is construed as, have an effect on somebody's ability to catch fish. But the other one is because they're such large animals with huge appetites that they impact the fisheries in the streams that they reside in, and that's actually not the case. They feed primarily on crayfish, but anything that floats through these cover rocks. Small fish, crayfish, they're going to suck up. Just to watch them feed sometimes, it's kind of like a small vacuum cleaner. That big mouth opens up and it gets sucked in.
That's a great photo.
But they don't have an impact on our trout fisheries or bass fisheries or things like that. So
okay, good to know.
It is the state's largest salamander. They can get up to lengths of 30 inches. And they can weigh in excess of about 3 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're big animals. They're very long-lived animals. They can live in the wild for up to 30 years, which is pretty important because an animal that lives long like that, and most amphibians have high reproductive outputs. They can contribute a lot of animals to the population over the course of their life.
Right.
So it's pretty important. And you can see from the picture, very flattened body and head that they use to get underneath these big cover rocks in these streams and rivers. But you also see another characteristic in the photo is how much skin they have, which is very important. And especially down the sides, you see a lot of folds and wrinkles along those sides, and that's because even though they have lungs, they most of the oxygen they get in, they pull through their skin. So it transfers from the water through their skin.
Can they breathe outside the water?
They can, but it's really thought that the lungs are for buoyancy more than they are for breathing. So most of that oxygen exchange occurs through the skin in the water.
Okay.
So, and then another interesting thing is they're stay-at-home dads. The females will actually, when the male excavates a nest underneath these cover rocks, the female will go in, lay the eggs, they'll be fertilized, and then the female leaves and the male stays behind, and he actually guards and protects the eggs for about 45 to 60 days until they hatch.
Wow.
So it's pretty neat to see that the males actually provide the parental care.
The roles change there.
Yes, yes.
I think it's neat to look at them because they kind of resemble the rocks and things that you see in the water. Some of those pictures, it's kind of, if you not know what you're looking for, sometimes it can be kind of camouflaged.
Yes, that color and patterning on the Hellbenders actually varies by each individual, and it blends in perfectly with a lot of these stream bottoms. So these animals like to the flowing habitats of rivers and streams and creeks, usually that have large cover rocks. They like that water to be cool and highly oxygenated. Generally, that cool water actually allows for more oxygen exchange, so that's why they prefer that cool water. And actually, even though there's a reduction in the number of streams that meet those requirements, there's actually a lot of streams all the way over here to Middle Tennessee that actually work. A lot of people associate with mountain streams in East Tennessee, but we have some streams here in Middle Tennessee that actually are preferred by the Hellbender.
Awesome. And they're shallow streams, right? And you don't find them in deep water, do you?
Well, yeah, they can use some deep pools and the cover objects in those deep pools. We've had some people that have actually done some diving and snorkeling for some of the deeper pools.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool.
But usually when we search the streams and rivers, we actually reduce that to what we can safely wade. Because usually the way I've done it in the past is you go downstream, 1 or 2 miles, and then you wade upstream searching for the Hellbenders. And that way the water's flowing all the debris behind you, and you can see the Hellbenders under the rocks.
Right.
And then you just swim over the deep pools. So I don't know if that's the way you guys have done it. So
yeah, for the most part, when we did this project, there were a few deep pools, and you've got some of the professors at TSU holding people down so they can get under these rocks. So it's pretty good.
But the reason why this project got started is because we had about 600 occurrences in our database. And most of those were 20 years old or older. So we actually wanted to revisit these sites and kind of put a map together to show what that looked like pre-2000. You can see there's a lot of dots on the map. But then we started doing the surveys, we found out that we've lost a lot of our populations here in Middle Tennessee and then along the Cumberland Plateau for a lot of different reasons. So in 2016, we actually listed this species as state endangered because of the concerns and the number of populations we had lost.
Okay.
So, but then the work, this right here is a video of what the surveys look like, basically lifting these large cover objects up and pulling the Hellbenders out.
Don't try this at home, right?
No, and you got to be permitted to do this type of work through the agency. Depending on where that work's at, you may have to have additional permits from other agencies as well. So
it's cool to see y'all hands-on on how it all happens.
It is, and one of the things that we do when we get those animals out of the water, we take, of course, the measurements and sex them and age them and different things like that, but we take a swab of their skin so that we can actually identify potential diseases that they may be harboring, and then we also take a tail clip so we can do genetics with the species.
Cool.
That's kind of leads me here to this next map, and this is some of the, because one of the things that was discussed early on was the need to possibly augment some of these populations with animals from across the state. So that's why we took the tail clips when we found them. We wanted to actually get a better idea of what our genetics were, because there's a few subspecies. One's actually recognized as endangered by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and it's the Ozark Hellbender. And so we wanted to make sure that just basically determine what that genetic diversity was. And there's 3 populations that we had enough information on to say beyond a shadow of a doubt that these are different from one another. Even though it's the same species, there's enough diversity between these that they clayed out together. And that's down in southeast Tennessee. All the other dots that have that aren't filled in, they kind of clayed together. So the upper East Tennessee animals clayed together, and then the Cumberland Tennessee River and Duck Rivers clayed together. We just didn't have enough samples to actually shade in those circles. So
Gotcha.
We're hoping to get more samples over time. So, but we know that our animals in Southwest Middle Tennessee are a little bit different than those in East Tennessee.
All right. You can say that with some of the people too. No, I'm just kidding.
So during our work, survey work with our partners, one of the biggest causes of declines is habitat loss and degradation. And it's kind of crazy to think, but a lot of these big rocks are becoming embedded. Sounds like an odd word, but the sediment that's flowing through our streams actually collects around these rocks, and it's like concrete. They
closes them off then to access, doesn't it?
It does, and so the Hellbenders are forced from their homes, or they can't find any other homes. And of course, that type of sediment that's flowing through there affects water quality, which has an impact to younger Hellbenders. And then some of the removal of timber around streams and things like that affects water temperature. But we also found in some cases where we had a lack of connectivity, where some dams have been built. So you don't have animals moving freely in and out of the population, which has an effect. And then we had disease is creating some issues. And of course, here's a picture somebody took from outside the state, but you can see where the large cover objects are removed and
stacking,
and whether this animal died, from people stomping on it while those rocks were removed, or was predated because it didn't have cover, that's unknown. But either one can happen, and that has a huge impact to the species.
Sure.
So
It's crazy to see in that photo. You can really tell that there's no structure or anything around it. It's just the sand or silt or whatever on the bottom.
Yeah, and Mallory was talking about how they fight each other. That these animals will bite each other's toes off and things like that. And this animal's actually missing a few toes on its front forearm or forelimb. So, but yeah, so they're pretty nasty to each other. But we can't move their habitat around to where they won't survive. So.
Right.
The other big thing we noticed too was we didn't have any juvenile Hellbenders in most of the populations we surveyed.
Mostly adults.
It was all adults. There's a couple populations in East Tennessee where we get a lot of different age classes, so a lot of different sized animals, which represents different years of recruitment into those populations. But here in Middle Tennessee, no different age classes. It was just all large adults. Some cases old adults, and so there's no recruiting going on in these populations. So we're seeing reproduction. We're just not seeing from egg hatching to a different age class. So something's having an impact to that. We think some of it's a lack of habitat because juvenile Hellbenders are thought to use the interstitial spaces of rock and cobble. So all those little spaces that aren't filled with sediment, that's where these Hellbenders get down and they seek cover from predators and they develop into the smaller class individuals. So, but we also, bigger than that, UT has been doing quite a bit of disease research on amphibians in the state. Juvenile Hellbenders are highly susceptible to disease. So a lot of these animals are likely succumbing to infections from different rhinoviruses or chytrids that are in these watersheds. And so that just kind of zaps those age classes from recruiting. So. And then we partnered, we identified a site in southwest Middle Tennessee on Laurel Hill, WMA. And they had Laurel Hill has a pretty good population of Hellbenders. And so that gave us something to start from.
Sure.
Partnered with the Nashville Zoo, and they started collecting eggs, taking them back to the zoo, and hatching them off. And so after about 5 years, we decided it was time to turn them loose, that they'd gotten big enough disease wouldn't be an issue, or the predation would be less likely. And so we turned our first group loose last year. It was 26 animals back into the little buffaloes. The first time it's happened in the state. So we were pretty excited about that. And we plan to do this again this coming year in 2022. So
good deal. Well, real quick plug. We did a show out at the Nashville Zoo not a little while ago. I guess check the archives. You can see that show and some of those interviews with some of those biologists there. So that was fun.
Yeah, they get a lot of stuff going on. They're helping the Biodiversity Division out on several different things. So Hellbenders is the big project they're helping us out with right now. So.
I remember during our visit there, they were showing us some concrete structures that they had that were poured and made for habitat. Are those still effective, you think?
They are. That's a concrete nest box, and actually this next video will have you'll see the end or the entrance to that nest box in the water, and so that's one way to help augment the loss of habitat. And it's basically just a big concrete cavity that's got one entrance in it, entrance and an exit. It's all the same hole, and they take them out and put them in the streams and river and sink them and cover them up with larger rocks so they don't float down the river.
Yeah,
and that's a way to augment that habitat for hellbenders.
Okay,
it's good for catfish as well. So, but
for all those folks who like to
grabble,
grabble, or what do they call it?
Noodle,
yeah,
yeah. So, and here's a video of one of the animals being turned loose, and you can see like that hole for the concrete artificial nesting box. So those things, and this is the animal going in. It's about a 4 or 5 year old animal. So being turned loose for the first time in Tennessee, it's pretty exciting that day.
That is neat.
So
history in the making.
Yeah, and so we're going to continue this project. We've got several different cohorts or groups of individuals we intend to turn loose. Like I said, a couple of cohorts here in 2022, and they're still collecting eggs and hatching them off. So we'll continue this in the future. But then we have another head starting program. The Forest Service is partnered with the Chattanooga Zoo, and so they're doing a similar project over in East Tennessee to augment some of the streams where populations are declining or been lost over time. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's great.
And then we talked about don't move the rocks. These are some examples of the signs that are going to be placed out on some of these sites where hellbenders. The one on the left kind of indicates what to do if you catch a hellbender, who to contact, and the others is talking about don't move in the rocks. So
if you, right there it says it on the sign, but if you catch one with hook and line, what do you do?
The easiest thing to do would be to cut the line and turn the animal loose.
Leave the hook.
Yeah.
Okay.
It should rust out over time or be removed. I think you would do with barbed hooks these days. I think you do more damage to the animal trying to remove the hook, and they're very hard to hold on to. So I can only imagine trying to take a hook out of a hellbender. So
wow.
But
then you get your hand too close, they might snap at you.
Exactly. So and I think that's, so this is the list of the partners we've worked with over the years and still active with. We got a grad student from Tennessee State that all the hellbenders we turn loose, they have transmitters in them, so we track them over time. They also have pit tags, which are passive integrated transponders. Mm-hmm. So every hellbender has its own unique identifier. So when we go to the stream, we can say this is this animal, and it's distinguished from all the others.
Very similar to what they do on fish too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Same kind of tag.
Yeah, and some researchers actually use that for bats too. So it's
cool.
Technology that's been used across different species. So it's pretty neat. So
awesome. Well, Mallory, you haven't said a whole lot because this was really Josh's presentation.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. But I just want to say, some of the earlier projects you worked with, some of these. Tell us what some of the experiences you had out there. What was one of the most exciting times with you? Working with these animals.
Most exciting time would be when we did get to release that first cohort.
Yeah.
It's always really special to see these animals that have been raised captive, which I wanted to emphasize how important that step is. Something that Josh just barely missed was that they don't reach sexual maturity until about 7 years old. So that's the big importance of being able to captive rear these animals. Like you said, we're missing that class just below 7 years. So there's a whole group of animals, a whole year or several years, a decade even, that we're going to miss as these older animals do start to die off just naturally. So we keep going much longer without that middle class, and that's where we do reach extirpation in this one population. So having the zoo be able to rear these animals kind of gives us a little bit more time to figure out what the problem in the stream system is.
Right.
So that's a really important step. So these animals that are being released are just shy of that reproduction age. And
a lot less susceptible to being predated and some of the other things that the younger class would be subject to, right?
Right. So that part in itself is such a huge step to this whole process of, like I said before, trying to figure out why these animals are declining or what's going wrong with the stream system. But yeah, so I'd say the release is really special, but also seeing that captive rear process, getting the animals used to actually becoming predators is really cool. So then you do get to see right in front of your face them snatching up a crayfish. Yeah. Because it's all really fast and, like we said, aggressive. So I really enjoy pretty much every part of it. The telemetry, seeing what these animals are using once they're released has been very interesting, and just working with partners is always interesting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she mentioned something too. One of the funny stories from my perspective is so these animals are collected as eggs, and they're hatched in the zoo, so they've really never experienced anything in the wild. So part of the project is trying to teach them to be wild on their own. So it's not necessarily teaching, but get them to be wild. And so they're initially raised on mealworms and fish and things like that, but then their main predators are crayfish. So we started bringing crayfish into them, and the first Hellbender that sucked up a crayfish was like, oh my gosh, what have I got? And he spit it out. So it actually takes a little bit of time to get these guys back onto a natural prey source, and so we're spending a lot of time, or at least the zoo is, trying to get these animals to go from what they're used to what they need to be eating. So that way when we turn them loose, it's not an additive stress, and they're doing what they're supposed to do in the wild.
Trying to find that time when it's the right time to introduce that type of food.
Yes.
Maybe you can introduce it earlier to where, I don't know, it's not so afraid of, what is that when I sucked it in?
Clamps down on a cheek inside.
Yeah, right.
No, that's not what I want. I want that fish, that mealworm.
Softer.
Yeah. Well, this has been good. Thank you guys for what you do. I know people out there may not realize that you do this work and some of the stuff that's going on and all these partners that we have. So it's good to hear this every now and again and remind us that there's a lot of fun stuff, a lot of good stuff going on out there.
Yeah, we got our hands in a lot of different things and a lot of different animals in our division. So a lot of projects like this, not just for amphibians and bats, but other species as well.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Don, anything else?
I think we're good. Thank you guys for coming in. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Taking care of these seldom seen, seldom heard about species, that are so cool and so much fun.
Well, if you want to watch the show and see some of these snot otters or whatever you may call them, check out the Wildcast on YouTube or Facebook and go watch the show. But we appreciate everybody out there tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay connected with TWRA by visiting our website at tnwildlife.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hey, it's all about Tennessee wildlife. It's what we do. Tennessee Wildcast will be on the air again next week. We'll see you then.